Well, Alinta Energy has been forced to alter plans for an offshore wind farm off the coast of Victoria after government intervention. The company could move the project further from shore, but that would force it to use floating wind turbines, which are expensive and not yet commercially viable. Joining us live is Jim Snow. He's the Executive Director with the energy consultancy Oakley Greenwood. Jim, good to see you. Thanks for your time. I invited you on because I wanted to have a broader chat about wind farms and particularly offshore wind farms. We're seeing these cropping up in the news more and more. Let's just start at the beginning here. Tell us about the construction process because, as I understand it, most of these are floating wind turbines. How are they set up? Are some of them attached at all to the seabed?
Yeah, so most of it's been onshore at the moment. I've spent a fair bit of time. In fact, we're dealing with a 1,000 megawatt one in Queensland at the moment. They're fairly straightforward, but the offshore ones, depending on the depth of the water and the wave state that you're dealing with, up to 50, 60 metres of depth, you can anchor them directly. Otherwise, they have to be floating with anchors. And so you have to have a seabed that can deal with that. So that technology, the floating technology, is a lot newer than the ones that have been built in Europe, which are actually completely anchored to the floor, much like you would see with a floating oil rig or something like that, and able to deal with that depth. But as you get further away and off the continental shelf, you're going to have to anchor them, as you're seeing in the photos here, and have them floating. And that's a bit of a development cycle still. We're probably in the 6 to 10 year range before you'll see that sort of stuff really becoming commercial.
Right, okay. Well, plenty of communities around Australia are really starting to pay attention to all of this now, aren't they? Because we are seeing a number of proposals being put out there. So just tell us a bit about how they actually work, how those offshore wind farms work, how much energy can they harness? You mentioned they're pretty expensive to construct. Are they actually commercially viable at the moment?
No, I don't think they are. I mean, the problem is you're going to be competing with a lot of onshore wind opportunities at the moment, but it's that long cycle of development. There's a lot of work that has to go in before you can even think about putting them out there. I mean, I think the Star of the South is talking 6 to 10 years even for their development, which will be anchored, or would have been anchored. So it is very difficult to see these things coming in really early commercially, but they do take a long time to build up. They are a viable technology and they can be bigger. And they don't have the same approvals issues, or they thought they didn't have the same approvals issues as trying to get land and use of land and how you do all that stuff on land. But they are a longer term investment and they will have to compete with farms that are here and now going in on the mainland.
Yeah, they are pretty remarkable pictures we're showing people there. How far offshore generally are those wind farms that have been constructed, and how complicated are the current rules and regulations about where they can be built? I mean, I assume we're not going to see wind farms off Bondi Beach in New South Wales or Cottesloe here in WA.
Yeah, I think the rule of thumb is if you can see them, they're too close. The reality is I think they're talking 20 kilometres at the moment. They have got two zones, one in New South Wales, one in Victoria. There is this issue about how close they need to be. Then you run into all sorts of other issues too. I mean, we have a massive whale migration up and down that same coast, so they're having to deal with that and studies around that, fishing, other use of the sea, and frankly, just the sea state. I mean, I've sailed out there and I can tell you it's pretty frightening at times. And so they really have to build these to deal with the sea state as well.
Okay, but you were alluding before that onshore wind farms are certainly much more realistic at the moment here in Australia in terms of their viability.
Yeah, so we're helping a group set up a development of 1,000 megawatt ones for the new copper string power line into Queensland. And the interest internationally in those is extreme. I mean, we have got some really big firms out of Spain, out of Italy, looking to very, very good construction firms, really good record, to build them here in Australia. They're spending a lot of money setting up here, really good teams of people, and bidding against these. It's a very strong bidding market. So we've got at the moment 3 shortlisted bidders for a 1,000 megawatt power station. And they are really serious about what they're doing. And there's no doubt in my mind they can build them, and they're very, when I say cost effective, they're competitive.
Okay, just looking again at these pictures at the construction phase there, I mean, how big are these? How big is a turbine generally?
Huge. I mean, those blades weigh about 40 tonnes each.
Wow.
You're talking 150 metres in the air. talking 6 megawatt turbines, 6,000 kilowatt turbines. These are massive pieces of kit. A lot of the construction is actually getting the kit even to the site, getting it across the ocean, getting it across the roads, getting it into the site itself, and then erecting it. It's a very skilled job to do it, and you don't want any damage on the way either. Some of these have occurred before where they've been damaged in transit. So yeah, you really need firms that have got really good capability internationally and a lot of money to actually back their projects before they fully finance them.
Jim Snow, fascinating to hear all about that. Really appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise and insights into how
Anytime.
all of that's playing out. Thanks so much.